Welcome back to a Book a Day podcast. These days we are discussing Daodejing, or as some people call it, Tao Te Ching, the ancient classic from China. And I'm very well aware that we have moved on from one book per day to maybe one book for several days. But notice the kind of book that we are dealing with at the moment. It requires time, it requires slowness on our part. We can't really rush through it. It deserves your time. So I hope you'll be comfortable with that, and we'll continue exploring the book in the next few episodes as well. So far, we covered the first 10 chapters of the book, really short ones. Hardly any chapter goes beyond a few lines, maybe a couple of verses. But as you would have noticed, when you try to interpret it, discuss it, that part takes time. And we'll continue doing that in this episode as well. We'll discuss the chapter number 11 to 20 and see what kind of wisdom is in there. So without any delay, let me start with chapter 11, which talks about emptiness. It's a beautiful concept, mostly Eastern concept, I would say, and it comes up in different philosophies. Let me read the chapter for you first, and then we'll discuss. It goes, 30 spokes share one hub. Because of the hole in the center, the wheel can turn. Clay is shaped into a pot. It is the empty space within that makes it useful. Doors and windows are cut to make a room. It is the empty space that we live in. Therefore, what is there gives advantage, but what is not there makes it useful. Beautiful, right? Beautiful lines on emptiness. Lao Tzu reminds us that absence is perhaps as important as presence. And you consider all the things that he's talking about, whether the wheel, the pot, or the room of a house, the usefulness there depends so much on emptiness, not just on what is there, but also what is missing in that. And once again, it talks about something deeper, the invisible force, the Tao that sustains life. And it reminds us to value beyond what is tangible. The emptiness, the silence, the pauses, the stillness, they all are important to make it meaningful. The next chapter is about moderating the senses. A few seconds ago, you might have heard some kind of firecracker, that explosion, and that's what we are talking about here. That we are supposed to moderate the senses, otherwise they can overwhelm us, they can really trigger us, hurt us. Let me read these lines from the chapter. It goes, the 5 colors blind the eye, the 5 tones deafen the ear, the 5 flavors dull the taste. Racing and hunting madden the mind. Treasures hard to obtain lead to wrongdoing. Therefore, the sage cares for the belly, not for the eye. Rejecting the superficial, he embraces what is within. Quite simply, it says that excess sensory stimulation, that is, if there's too much color, sound, or taste, it can overwhelm and dull your sensitivity. The belly in this case not necessarily talks about the literal belly or stomach. It represents our inner nourishment, contentment, simplicity. And sometimes we may interpret it as rejecting all kind of beauty. But that's not what it is talking about. It is talking about rather warning against overindulgence. When we are just obsessed with chasing the sensations, we lose contact with the center of our being. We might lose that grounding that we really need to find meaning. The next chapter talks about two things, going back to the earlier ideas that we discussed of yin and yang, opposites. Here it talks about favor and disgrace, that is, you getting praise from some people or blame from others. It goes, favor and disgrace both cause alarm. High position brings anxiety as surely as the self does. Why are favor and disgrace alarming? Because they make us dependent on the opinions of others. When we no longer identify with the self, favor and disgrace cannot touch us. Not very hard to interpret, is it? It just warns us that both praise and blame, they can limit us, they can hurt us, because in either case we are seeking approval from other people or we are fearing rejection from other people. And in both those cases we remain enslaved to other people's opinions. And the way to get out of it is detachment. Detachment from this constructed self, this constructed image, the ego that we defend or promote. And we need to get beyond that. And beyond that, to what, you might ask? That's the Tao. That's the invisible Tao. And it talks about it in the next chapter. The next chapter goes, looked at but not seen. It is invisible. Listened to but not heard. It is inaudible. Grasped but not held. It is intangible. Above, it is not bright. Below, it is not dark. Returning to the source of all things, it is shapeless, nameless. It is the form of the formless, the image of the imageless. So that's Tao. And you can find similarities, as I've pointed out on multiple occasions. When the Indian philosophy talks about consciousness or self, this is what it talks about. This is the ultimate thing. It is there, but it's not tangible. And you can find so much simplicity and yet so much mysticism in this chapter. Here Lao Tzu describes the Tao as something beyond all sensory perception, something that we cannot see or hear or even grasp. This is the hidden essence. And this hidden essence, although it is invisible, it is intangible, it gives rise to all things. So the Tao, if you want to understand it, it is like silence beneath sound, emptiness beneath form. And to sense it, one must quiet the senses and the mind. And one must experience. One must go beyond even understanding, just experience this silence, this emptiness. And it is something that the ancient masters experienced. The chapter 15 kind of praises them for what they did. The chapter 15 says, the ancient masters were subtle, mysterious and profound. Their depth was beyond knowing, because they were cautious, like crossing a frozen stream, alert like one aware of danger on all sides, courteous like a guest, fluid like melting ice, open like a valley, and clear like still water. So that's how he describes the wise men. The wise, they are calm, they are alert, and they are balanced from the inside, from the outside. And their wisdom comes from patience and humility. They don't try to control things, they just stay patient. They flow with the universe, with the motion of the universe. So, what we can learn from this passage is that the sage lives gently and mindfully, and he moves through life with awareness. So, not with anxiety and not forcing yourself, just going with the flow gently. And that's the infinite nature of self-knowledge, because it cannot be measured, its depth is huge, and that's what you should aspire for. And that's really the ultimate aim. That's the spiritual message here, that this is exactly what we should aim for. This is where we ought to return to the source. And the next chapter, chapter 16, talks precisely about that. It goes, empty yourself of everything. Let the mind rest at peace. The 10,000 things rise and fall, while the self watches their return. They grow and flourish and then return to the source. Returning to the source is stillness, which is the way of nature. So once again, like the traditional Eastern philosophy, it separates the mind from the idea of consciousness. It says that 10,000 things rise and fall, which is the mind, which is the thoughts, while the self watches their return. That is, the self or the consciousness, it is just observing it. It's at peace. It's observing as the mind goes on with its tasks. But it goes even beyond the self. It talks about returning to the source. Once you return to the source, after all this has happened, the mind has played out its thoughts. That's the way of nature. That's the Tao it's talking about. So Lao Tzu, in other words, he invites us to rest in the rhythm of life itself. That is, this creation and dissolution, coming and going. It happens in the outside world, it happens within you. Thoughts come, they go. What do the wise people do? They do not cling to any of it. The outside world, inner thoughts, no. They watch the movement of all this and understand, just experience it. That's the stillness we are talking about. Once again, this stillness, just to clarify, this is not escape. It is participation in life, but participation without biases, without disturbances. And by turning inwards, we align ourselves with the natural rhythm of the Tao, which kind of moves in cycles. Things rise and they fall, and we ought to return to that. And that's the wisdom here. Then, in the next chapter, chapter 17, he talks about the best rulers, what they do. Let me read it for you. The best rulers are those whose existence is barely known by the people. Next come those who are loved and praised. Then those who are feared. The worst are those who are despised. When the best ruler's work is done, the people say, we did it ourselves. It's a wonderful kind of political message, I find. It's beautiful, talks about leadership, and gives us such a profound lesson in leadership. And in Lao Tzu's eyes, this leadership has to be invisible. This has to be form of invisible guidance. It influences others, but it does not impose. And it leads by presence, not by power. So, as I said, this is a political advice, but this is very much psychological, even spiritual, because you're also a ruler of yourself. You're also a ruler in this world. You will at some point guide others, and at all times you'll guide yourself. Whether you're guiding your thoughts, your senses, your perceptions, the idea is that you guide quietly, without dominance, without any drama, without taking credit. Just guide gently and do the work without asking for credit or anything. Just do your job. So that's the lesson here. Now on to chapter number 18, which talks about the fall from the Tao. What happens when the great Tao is forgotten? It goes, when the great Tao is forgotten, kindness and morality arise. When cleverness and knowledge appear, great hypocrisy follows. When family ties decay, filial piety and duty arise. When the nation falls into chaos, ministers talk of loyalty. It's very interesting here because at some point you might feel like he's talking about kindness is arising, knowledge is appearing. All these are positive qualities. But what he's talking about here essentially is that when you disturb the natural harmony of the universe, of the Tao, then arise these artificial constructs and virtues. They take its place, like morality, loyalty, duty. They might be good. It's not that they are bad, but they are compensations for something deeper that has been forgotten. And that's a very important point. It's not about that these qualities are not admirable, but they are not the real things we should aspire for. They are compensation for something more profound. And when you interpret this chapter, it takes a while to kind of understand and go through it, because it is one of the most paradoxical chapters. It talks about virtues, but it doesn't really appreciate them, nor does he condemn them, but he exposes how moral codes arise only after natural goodness has declined. Otherwise, the natural flow of life is positive, it's beautiful, there's harmony in it. The true harmony, it doesn't need any rules. And the fact that we need rules, the fact that we need morality, it means that something has already been broken. And we need to work on that rather than keep on working on fixing it through artificial behavior, through imposing morality. No, we need to bring out the natural goodness in ourselves, in others. That's the message here. And in the next chapter, he talks about how we can abandon these superficial virtues and why really it's so important. Let me read this chapter for you, chapter number 19. It goes, abandon holiness, discard wisdom, and people will benefit 100-fold. Abandon morality, discard righteousness, and people will return to natural goodness. Abandon profit, discard greed, and thieves will disappear. These three things are outward forms. They are not sufficient in themselves. Better to hold to simplicity, to see the plain and embrace the uncarved block. So as I said in the previous chapter, what was being discussed, in this case, he just deepens that previous idea that when society becomes obsessed with wisdom, virtue, and gain, it moves away from the natural state of harmony, which is balanced. The uncarved block that he talks about here, it symbolizes pure potential. Life as it is before it is shaped by ambition or pride or morality is just a call to radical simplicity. Lao Tzu is pointing at the innocence beyond any morality. And remember, this is not just plain ignorance, but this is wholeness, because Tao is full of wholeness, untouched by any calculation, cleverness. You might keep wondering that cleverness has been negatively mentioned so many times in the text, but that's the case. He thinks that when somebody is trying to be clever, they are moving away from their natural goodness. That's the idea here. We return to our goodness. We return to the natural harmony of life. And then the chapter 20 once again goes back to the ancient yin and yang. It talks about beyond approval and disapproval. Let me read it for you. Give up learning and put an end to your troubles. Between yes and no, how much difference is there? Between good and evil, what is the distance? People are merry as if enjoying a feast, or climbing a tower in springtime. I alone am quiet and still, like an infant that has not yet smiled. I am like a fool, confused, aimless, drifting. Everyone seems full of purpose. I alone am different, nourished by the Great Mother. Now, Lao Tzu, this is a really important chapter. He contrasts himself, the quiet, drifting sage, and he contrasts himself with the busy, purposeful world. And he suggests that the true peace lies beyond constant comparisons or judgment or ambitions. You don't have to chase them. You can be content, can be joyful within you, just by being yourself. And once again, finding that harmony. And he kind of mocks himself, This tone sounds quite mocking. But this foolishness is also sacred. It's the wisdom of someone who no longer needs to prove or possess anything. He seems enlightened and being nourished by the Great Mother, that is the Tao. It means living from an inner source, not social approval. So you are content, you are joyful from the inside. You don't need anything from the outside. So these were the ideas from chapter number 11 to 20. And in a similar fashion, we'll continue exploring the next 10 chapters in the next episode, and then so on. I hope you're enjoying this reading. You are enjoying the kind of wisdom that is there in the book. This is literally the heart of the Chinese philosophy, the ancient Chinese philosophy. And you find so much simplicity in it. And how the values that they are admiring are very different from some of the values that rest of the world admires. Like morality is greatly valued across cultures. But here you find that they are going beyond even morality. They are asking you to find that balance without having to impose anything on you. Just finding that goodness within you. So with that, I'll take your leave, And as I promised, I'll catch you the next time with the next 10 chapters. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.